Hello and welcome to Bury Our Bones with Cinema, the podcast that lives, breathes and dies classic movies, not so classic movies and everything in between. Once again, I have the pleasure of being joined by the Iron Man to my Do the Ironing Man, the Purple Rain to my Purple Rinse, the wonderful Mr. Simon Keet. In today's episode, we take a worrying look into the future at a bug-ridden, totalitarian, far-right fascist wet dream in Paul Verhoeven's 1997 sci-fi commentary, Starship Troopers. So join us as we look directly down the lens and say, I'm doing my bit, wipe the unwanted bug juice from our armour, and try not to lean too far to the right as we wonder if it was all really worth it in the end.
JML teleporters, bang, and the fly is gone.
So, Starship Troopers, November 7th, 1997. Welcome back, obviously, Simon. It's good to have you back on for another episode. And obviously we're doing Starship Troopers. So tell me about the first time, if you can remember, when you saw this film.
I can't put a specific memory to it of when I first saw this, but I definitely remember being too young. I definitely remember thinking it was very gory, even for some of the other movies I'd watched, and it had that shock factor, and so I assume I was, yes, whatever the certificate is, probably quite a few years younger, and I just remember it being a really cool action movie.
It's becoming a little bit of a running theme that we tend to watch films that are perhaps slightly above our age range there, but yeah, it's very, very gory, isn't it? In a non kind of gory way, if that makes at all any sense. It's gory, obviously, but it's not like human gore. There is a little bit of that, but a lot of it is like the bug juice and the bug blood and all of that sort of stuff. There's some quite horrific scenes, though. Yeah,
I would say there's one scene at the end which is where one of the main characters, dies, and I would say that's pretty gory.
We are allowed spoilers on this podcast.
Well, right from the beginning. Okay, yeah, where the brain's getting sucked out.
Yeah, that's
grim.
Pretty grim.
I think that used to stick with me, and I used to not dread that bit. But that was the bit, the
bit where you kind of go, oh, I don't really want to be watching this.
Yeah.
I want to be looking away on this one.
But right from the beginning, when they're doing the science, they're in the science lesson, and he's taking out all the guts of the bug.
I know.
And then she throws up. It's quite gory, grim from the beginning.
It's quite a full-on kind of experience, isn't it?
Mm.
Well, I think I mentioned this when we were choosing this film, that I only saw this about 5 years ago for the first time, so I never watched it when I was younger. And the reason why is because I used to think, when I hear people speak about Starship Troopers and saying, it's a great film, it's got, a lot of subtext, etc., etc., and I used to think, really? That film? Thinking, how do people like that film? That film is awful. Never really understanding why people liked it. And the reason for that is, I figured out not so long ago, is because I remember when I was younger, probably around 11 or 12, on Channel 5 on a Friday night at 9:30, 10 o'clock, in the TV guide, so taking you back to a particular time frame, TV guide said Starship Troopers was on Channel 5, and I thought, what's that? That sounds pretty cool. Read the blurb. That sounds like my sort of film. Put it on, and it wasn't actually Starship Troopers. It was the film that we're going to be doing in the next episode. It was Battlefield Earth.
Wow.
So for years, I was going, why do people like Starship Troopers? That weird film with John Travolta with some alien dreadlocks. How do people like that film? And it was only when I realised, that's because that's not the same film. It's actually a different film from that. And then I ended up watching it. I was like, I now totally understand why people love this film.
So do you reckon there's anyone else out there that had that same experience from that same TV
There
guide?
must be.
How many TV guides are wrong? What other people watching Coronation Street?
I don't know if
thinking
it was I don't know if it was the TV guide or if it was like Channel 5 just happened to put like the wrong film on.
Oh, okay, fair. That sounds more like
it was just like such a weird sort of thing for like years. Like hearing, not that I hear people talking about Starship Troopers all the time, like on the bus or anything, but like I'd hear people say, "Oh yeah, Starship Troopers, that's a really good film. It's got like quite a lot of subtext and there's a lot going on in that." And I was literally going, "Really? Like, are we?" Obviously you don't mean that film, and it's true, they didn't mean that film, they meant this film. So that's kind of my not my first love, but my first kind of the door opening into Starship Troopers.
When you watched it, I guess, what was your immediate impressions then?
So it was like a realisation moment when I finally watched it. I like put it on and was like, it comes up with those like propaganda like adverts. It's like, click here if you want to know more, or whatever it says. And I'm just like, oh, I get, like every like scene I kept going, I get it now, I understand. Obviously, when you watch the wrong film, that's going to be a bit of a problem. So, and then when I learned it was Paul Verhoeven who directed it, obviously RoboCop, Total Recall, I'm like, oh yeah, like of course this is a good film. It's Paul Verhoeven. He's a brilliant director.
Yeah.
I love RoboCop. I love Total Recall. Of course, I'm going to love Starship Troopers. It's right in the same sort of wheelhouse.
Do you think it stands up to those other ones?
I think it's kind of I don't think it's going to be held in quite as high regard as a RoboCop or a Total Recall, and I think probably the only reason for that is because the lack of stars.
Yeah,
that's the only thing. I think if you were to put, and we'll obviously get onto some of the possible castings that were talked about at the time. If you put a slightly bigger star in the lead role or in a supporting role, I think it would be talked about a lot more. I think obviously RoboCop, you've got, well, actually RoboCop doesn't really have any big stars, but it's RoboCop.
Is that the type of thing because his Total Recall's got
Total Recall's
Arnold.
got Sharon Stone, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, okay. I would say this. I guess we're not into casting yet, but I'd say this movie is cast well in general. Do you think so?
I think it's expertly cast.
Yeah,
I think it's a really. I think when we get onto that section when we speak about potential castings, I think one of the things I'm going to be saying a lot is if that had happened, it would have gone far too much into mainstream. I think part of the reason why this film works is because it's slightly has a cult-like status.
Yeah.
It's the film that people kind of not necessarily always to go to. Like, as I say, if you think of Paul Verhoeven, you're going to think of RoboCop or Total Recall first. You're not necessarily always going to go to Starship Troopers first. Just trying to, some of the other films, Basic Instinct as well.
Yeah.
Another great film. Probably for a trilogy of films, RoboCop, Total Recall and Basic Instinct from Paul Verhoeven, those are his 3 films he done one after the other. That's a pretty good, that's a great movie night.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
I mean, these are some of my favourite movies, to be honest. I think I don't know if it matters what you see first, because if you see RoboCop first, the adverts and how it shows that does some of the world building is very similar, isn't it? RoboCop.
It's a very perfect phrase, like world building.
Yeah,
like you feel totally. You understand the world because of the things that are set up in place, and all of the like subplots aren't subplots. They all feed into that main narrative, and it may seem like what's this? This is a bit of a left field thing, but actually it just as you say, builds that world up to a point where you go, I now totally understand the world that I'm watching.
Yeah, and you see it all through the propaganda of the Federation or whatever.
I know, it's quite frightening as well. I think that it's one of those films where the more you think about it, the kind of more frightening it becomes.
I did get a different. What happens is that further away in the movie, I guess, that there's that big attack, or halfway through, there's the attack on Buenos Aires, and then and then that triggers them to attack. Is it the bug homeworld? Yeah.
I can't think of the name of it now, but I know. Yeah.
So this time watching it, it made me think. Is that even is that staged? You know, with a conspiracy house, you don't really ever. I don't think you actually ever see it. What happens? It just looks like it's blown up.
I think that. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Like, there isn't any. There's a lot of trust involved for the characters. They're trusting what's being fed to them. At no point are they really kind of questioning it. They're just taking it at face value and going, "Oh, okay, well, this has happened, so that means I must do this." You know, and I think one of the things that is kind of laden throughout is this constant, almost like, I can't think what they call it, but when there's so much information being pumped at something, it's almost disinformation, because you can't see in there, you know, in 100 lies there may be one truth, but you're never going to find it because it's in 100 lies. It's that kind of thing. And I think, you know, part of the, as I say, what I was saying, when it's like part of the thing of where more you think about, the scarier it kind of gets, is kind of how easy it is to, you know, make people believe a certain thing if you do it in the right kind of way. And I think, you know, Paul Verhoeven, I think, made those conscious choices. Once we get into, like, you know, why he wanted to make the film and his kind of reasonings behind it, it kind of makes a lot more sense as to why that's all there. It's not just you know, a sci-fi shoot 'em up, you know, action film. It has those sort of philosophical and, you know, subtext type questions throughout.
You can kind of watch it as just that as well, because it's got like the romance. It's got like, how do you feel about the romance between, you know, that he fancies that one, and then Dizzy turns out to be the right one for him, but then she gets killed. I think
it's interesting to kind of like take it in context. So ordinarily that would be something that kind of annoys me, like a forced kind of romance kind of subplot is something in action films that kind of usually annoy me. But here, I think it all feeds into that kind of like overarching question of, like, you know, are these people ready? Is kind of the question I get a lot of the time. Are they ready for what life is going to throw at them? And it's like at every kind of stage, it's
they're
like,
still in high school crush phase, and they're literally thrown into that. And he only joins because of a girl, which is, you know, would be, you know, because it doesn't in this world, in the movie, it's you know, any gender can join the army, and you know, it's all quite mixed, isn't it? I think apparently in the book, from my understanding, is that I think the women more went into like being admirals on ships and stuff, but generally like the grunts were men. But in this, I think it's a good decision that they've made it much more mixed in this way. Yeah, and I think you would end up joining the forces for some. Yeah,
like it's a perfectly believable reason, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, you know, when we've been in high school, okay, yeah, we're not in a quite far right totalitarian future, but we're in a heightened emotional environment in our late teens. If you know, if one of your girlfriends or somebody you fancy said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to go off to this uni," or "I'm going to go off and do this with I'm going to go on a gap year," probably chances are you'll be maybe not doing it, but you might be considering, "Oh well, I'm going to go to where they're going to university or college," or "Oh, they're going on a gap year, so I'm going to go on a gap year."
Yeah, and some people's qualm with this movie is like the script and stuff, isn't it? But actually, I said a lot of dumb, stupid stuff that they were probably chatting about in that stage of my life. I would have been like doing all the cringy stuff. You know, I love the scene where they get a tattoo. I said to Christina, I said, whenever I've had friends who've been like, let's get a tattoo, that's the scene that's not made me do it. You know, when they'll get a tattoo that says, I think it just says death on it.
Yeah,
or something. Does it?
Not the most original of tattoos, is it?
But they'll have it's like a tattoo machine. I love that sort of stuff. I think. But yeah, some scenes from this movie do really stick with me, actually. That one, the brain-sucking bug bit's horrendous.
Slightly questionable looking brain bug. It does look quite dodgy in some facets. First thing I thought of when I saw it, watching the film for this episode, I was like, that looks a bit dodgy out of context.
There's a lot of nudity. Well, there's a lot of topless men and women, and there's like a shower scene near the beginning. I think when I was a kid, that was like something you'd have to almost look away at.
You know, that's a bit. You know, it's a bit raunchy. It's a bit sort of like, look around, see if your parents are in the room, or, you know, make sure nobody's come in and watch that scene. It's kind of.
Do you think it as well? it's kind of cool that I thought of why it would include that, and I thought one is to, you know, it's a sci-fi movie. A load of nerdy guys like me are probably going to like that. But another thing is that I guess it kind of serves the world you could argue it serves the world because they're a bit more like, you know, they're quite not liberal, no, because they're like fascist, aren't they? But
I think the thing that I took from a lot of this, including that scene, is they have quite a cavalier attitude to a lot of things. Yeah. So to violence, there's quite a cavalier kind of attitude. You know, when they're going to like boot camp and he throws the knife at the dude's hand. It's quite it's okay because we can put that like device on it that heals them. You know. So it doesn't matter that we actually have thrown a knife through a private's hand. You know what I mean? You know, it's kind of it's a cavalier attitude to kind of everything because it's in this. It's almost in this world where there is no real consequences. They're
living in a bit of a utopia, but the cost of that is this. The government, you have to serve your government before you can have a say in the society. I thought of like what that could mean as well, and I thought if you are a dissenter on the government, imagine you have to like join the army first in this world, and they just put you on a planet where you're going to get destroyed, and then no more dissenters.
That's the thing. It's, one of the scenes that I like, I think it's just before that shower scene. It might even be the shower scene when they're saying like why everybody joined, and like someone's like, I joined because of a girl. I joined because I want to have babies, and doing this gives me a license. And it's like everything goes through.
I must have missed that. Time.
It's the one with really really short hair. She's like, I want to have babies, and this grants me the license to do so.
Wow, so they really need to.
It's
do
literally I think like everything one of them says, I want to go into politics, and this means you have to do mobile infantry to go into politics. So it's like if you want to do anything in this world or under this government, you have to go through this like army essentially. So as you say, it grants you a license to have children, it grants you the ability to go into politics, and I think it's that the whole thing is nobody really questions anything. It's just kind of how it is, and
his parents were quite anti.
And and I think that's quite an interesting switch, because usually in those types of films where somebody's just graduating from high school and it's like, what are you going to do with your life? Usually the parents would be either saying, you're going to get a job or you're going to go into the military. And it's actually flipped and reversed, where the kid is going, I want to go into the military, and he's like, don't do that. You've got your whole life ahead of you.
And it was the impressionable teacher who later is the
Michael Ironside. I love that actor.
He's amazing. Yeah. He's sort of it's a great casting. He's really good.
And I don't know if you know this, but he's actually the voice of Sam Fisher in the Splinter Cell.
Ooh, that makes a lot of sense. So
he's got one of those distinctive voices that I like listening to.
Knows how to take out a CCTV camera with a terrible pistol.
Exactly. He knows how to hang from a water pipe just by hanging from his legs.
There's that's one way, because I have be open. I haven't read the OG book. I was probably going to come round to it at some point, actually, because I've recently got into reading sci-fi novels, and the furthest back I went in these type of ones was Forever War, which really inspired me in a lot of ways, actually, and that was I think it was it was a partial response to this book, or at least it was inspired by it, and it wrote it in a different way. And Forever War is much more of an anti-war book, sort of. He was a Vietnam war veteran, and then he wrote this book about the atrocities and how meaningless it all is. But so I would have liked to have read Starship Troopers, the book, before this, but I have to read it afterwards. That's okay. But
it just now means that you have something to go on to. I mean, there are 2 sequels to this film. Which I haven't watched, and I don't think I will be watching. I don't think they hold the same standard as the original.
In the book, I think one of the differences in this and the source material, I think, is that you don't have to necessarily join the military to be able to vote and have all those things. You can do other stuff. So this movie doubled down on it's the military you have to join, whereas not just do with something else for your society or whatever. So I think it's quite interesting that the director decided to, go, clamp down, go fully into this war thing. And I think it does end up working. I think sometimes when, it got not the best critical response, I wonder if that's because...
I wonder how many people took it for what it, on the face value, seems like what it is. It is just a bit of a 90s B-movie sci-fi film.
Yeah.
On face value. Unfortunately, I think it's one of those films where if people don't like it, it's probably because they don't get it. I hate being that person. Oh yeah, you don't get it. But I think it is that type of film where, even if you saw a trailer for it, you wouldn't necessarily know all of these things. It does just kind of look like, again, nothing is B-movie about it, in the sense of like the special effects are pretty decent.
Well, good.
For a nearly 30-year-old, 27-year-old film, it's special effects hold up and they're pretty decent. It's not, oh, this looks awful. You can tell this was made in the late 90s. So it has all of the things that for a big budget film, and we'll get onto the budget in just a sec. But on face value, if you were just taking it at surface value, I think it is one of those films where people either like it or dislike it. I don't think anybody goes, yeah, it's all right, based on face value. I think the thing that makes people come back is those kind of the questions that we've kind of been alluding to.
Yeah, because I think that's what it ages very well, because if you watch it very young, you do just take it as you can run around the playground pretending to shoot bugs. That's what I remember doing. One thing they didn't include though, which was interesting, is in the book had power armor. Like
Fallout type thing.
And if it had like a power armor, this would have felt even more like that Edge of Tomorrow Tom Cruise movie, wouldn't it? Because they would have been in these suits. It would have been.
Have you been looking at my further watching list?
But so I reckon maybe that was a budget thing, because that's quite a cool. But it's quite cool they don't have power armor, because it shows how kind of weak they are. But I'd imagine if they did include it, it would have been quite similar to that movie I just mentioned. It wouldn't have been the most impressive power armor. It would have been going wrong and malfunctioning in this movie, I think.
Yeah, it certainly needs a service.
Yeah.
So, just make our way back to the budget. So, in 1997, November 7th, 1997, this was made on a rather large budget of $105 million. Which is about £83 million, and in today's money, it's about £205 million. So you're looking at kind of, I would say a Marvel level kind of budget film. So, a lot of money spent on this. It made $22 million in its opening weekend, about £17 million. Domestically, it made $54 million. Dollars, that is, and then worldwide it made 121 million. So it's not an out success here. There is profit of about 16-17 million, but I think probably once you factor in marketing and things like that, it's not going to be making too much money, I don't think. So I think it's quite a... I think it's probably one of those films that got better with like VHS releases and DVD releases, and that's where it made a good proportion of its money back. Because if you spent 105 million and you only make worldwide 120 million, doesn't really seem like a film that would go, oh yeah, that deserves 2 sequels. Okay, the sequels are straight to DVD and much more budget affairs, but still doesn't seem like a film where you'd go, oh, well, it's not going to make that much money, because that one, which is the good one, only made 120 million at box office on a 105 million budget. So quite interesting when you look at the figures there.
Yeah, I think, I can see why. I guess I love this movie, by the way. I guess I think I could see why some people could see why the satire didn't land for them, I guess. But I think it's the fact that it maybe doesn't fully land that makes you be able to just keep returning to it. The fact that it doesn't quite because I think RoboCop nails that satirical thing a lot cleaner, and this sort of is like if it was a BMX jump or something, this is like a bit of a woggly landing.
Yeah,
that's what I like about the movie.
I think in RoboCop it's a lot more subtle, even though it's not subtle. But if you compare it to this, it's a lot more subtle. Here, it's very in your face. It's very, it's very difficult to miss. And I think the reason perhaps why this didn't make a great amount... Well, I mean, it made 120 million, but against the budget, you'd expect it to be making a bit more. Is this came out in the late 90s, so a pre-9/11 world, where this sort of stuff wasn't quite as prevalent in people's minds. I think if this comes out post 9/11, I think it makes, one, a lot more money. I think people understand it a lot more because they're kind of seeing this stuff happen right in front of them, or they're a bit more wary and a bit more kind of questioning what the media is telling them. And I think it's an interesting watch in 2024 with everything that's going on in politics in America, politics over here, and just all of this stuff going on. And I think it's a really interesting watch in today. I think it's one of those films where it gets better depending on what's happening in the world, because you're able to kind of see those things. I think this, Paul Verhoeven kind of made this as a bit of a warning about like far right kind of political movements. Obviously, being Dutch, I think he grew up in a sort of post World War II Europe where these things were still very prevalent, still very much part of the culture and the society he grew up in. And I think, as I say, it is that kind of warning into, let's not lean too far to the right, because a little bit like what we spoke about in the Dante's Peak thing, where small things happen, small incremental changes happen, and before you know it, you're over here when you're going, how did we get here?
Yeah. I think, I don't know, I think if it came out after 9/11, isn't it that after 9/11, they like everyone likes all the hero movies, isn't it? Like this, it's when all the Spider-Mans and stuff happened and things like that. Yeah,
when I say post 9, I don't mean 2002 or 2003. Yeah. I mean this. Say this came out in 2010, where the dust had kind of settled. That's a poor phrase to use, but 9/11 is kind of in the rearview mirror, but still quite important in our history. People are now at that point, I think, is when people started to kind of question what actually happened and all of these things. And I think that's when and I think perhaps DVD sales onto stream, and I think now is probably when people are picking up on that stuff a lot more. And I don't know if they would have been doing that in the 90s. I think that's perhaps why critically it wasn't very well received, because it seemed like this would never happen. This is such a far-fetched thing. It's ridiculous, but actually I think it's a lot more closer to home than people realise.
Do you know when Independence Day came out?
So Independence Day, I believe, is around 95. It's similar sort of time, definitely within a couple of years of each other.
There's something that brings me back to this a lot more than like Independence Day.
Yeah, I think Independence Day is essentially the Hollywood version, isn't it? Yeah. It's the aliens come to Earth and we can, it's all right because we're save the day sort of thing. And whilst that does kind of happen here, it's more we've saved the day and we've won the war, but at what cost?
Yeah.
Whereas that obviously that question in Independence Day, nobody really cares about that question. It's more like, oh yeah, Will Smith doing his heroics, that's pretty cool. Whereas here there is that question, okay, we're doing all of this and we've won the war and we've won the battle, but at what cost? It
kind of makes you question even now what side they're even on.
Yeah.
It with the clear outfit, the outfits are quite more like higher echelons of the Federation. Are they the Federation, aren't they?
Yeah, I think it's
the higher echelons of it there look much more like sort of Nazi Germany.
Yeah, and that was very much a conscious choice.
Yeah.
And for kind of good reason, for as I mentioned earlier, Paul Verhoeven.
I think if it was made now, I think they would have. I'm not sure why they call it whitewashing, don't they? Why? because obviously all the character names have like Latin American names and stuff.
I've never quite picked that's always the thing since I watched it for the first time properly, and I've watched it about 5 or 6 times since that point. I've never quite understood that. I've never quite understood that why it's all set in Buenos Aires and nobody is actually Latin American or South American.
This is the thing.
Unless I'm missing
this is the thing. The book is they used a lot of the source material for the ideas, but they didn't necessarily like. He was the guy that wrote the book. From YouTube comments and Reddit threads, he kind of laid it out as he was a real military man. His family went back for generations in the military, and he I think he supposedly even he wanted to join up early, and maybe he did join up early, and he wrote to his local person to get him signed up as soon as possible. So his experience of war was I don't know if he was in the Navy or something, but anyway, he kind of laid the world out as this futuristic, I think, a utopia living off of through the means of and you had to sign up to be able to get to actually, you have to do a service to your planet and race before you get to say what sort of goes on. And I think he kind of laid it out in a different way to how the movie does. And there was a lot of people, critique that and say, it's a bit, the critiques of that book, the movie really sort of, it runs with that more, like the kind of and some people say it's a misconception of the book because he lays it out, but it's still this mindless violence, and the main character is still turned into like a bit of a killing machine basically. Yeah. So he still lays it out and lets you decide, but people say that it's almost a bit of a misconception that he was pro this system, and then the book sort of the movie. Sorry, this is terrible explanation of this, but about the names, that's just from the book. It's set really far in the future where where the whole world has been globalized, and so they all have and they just to make it seem more diverse and everything, they all have these names. So I think if the movie was made now, I think they would be people. I think the main character is supposed to be a Filipino guy. Like we said earlier, I think his name in the book is Juan, and they changed it to Johnny. And I think it makes, you could argue that he's done that on purpose for the movie, and it kind of makes it seem more almost like you're watching a bit of propaganda from the state, watching the whole movie outside of it. Yeah, that's a very good point. You could also argue he's just got an American cast because it's an American movie, and I think if they made it now on Netflix, they would have a more diverse cast.
Probably would have a more diverse cast. Yeah, and it's interesting because I think a lot of the decisions that are made with this film actually all kind of feed in to these questions and these philosophical kind of ideas at play. So one of the things that I kind of mentioned, when I was watching it, within the first couple of minutes, and again, it's always a thing that happens in films where teenagers are the main characters. They're always played by people in their late 20s. Right across the board in Hollywood, it's just part and parcel of it. Very rarely do you get actual teenagers playing teenagers, And I was looking at it and going, yeah, but here that works. And the reason for me why it works is because it's almost like we're seeing what the government sees. They don't see teenagers. They see people who are fit and able to just go in.
Yeah, love that. Yeah.
Perhaps that's me as an audience member applying that kind of thought process post making of it. I'm not necessarily saying that Paul Verhoeven went, I'm going to have 27-year-olds playing late teens because of this reason. I'd maybe done that, but I wouldn't have thought it was. It was probably more because there's probably more laws around hiring teenagers than there is hiring people in their late 20s, for example. But it adds to that kind of feeling of we're not seeing teenagers, we're seeing adults, and that's kind of the point. They are teenagers, and kind of what you were saying earlier with looking at it again and thinking about it a bit more, the fact that they're not Latino or they're not Latin American or South American, but they have, you know, they live in Buenos Aires and they have, or some of them have Latin American type names, kind of makes us kind of go, well, hang on a minute, they're clearly not from that part of the world, and yet we're being told that they are part of that world. So we're now starting to do what I think Paul Verhoeven wants people to do, is question what we're being told.
Because I assume he thought about that, and it seems to be that it sort of pays off as it's like almost like a bit of a red flag. Like, hold on a minute, why have they got these names and they're all white? But yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? I think if it was made now, it would be slightly different. But I think it, you know, if that was a conscious choice, who knows? I don't know.
Excuse me. There.
No, it's all right. We'll cut that.
Edit that out. Post production.
So there is that one bit, isn't there, where cause it you don't really, you know, you get the parents that are very just say, oh, you know, don't go join them. This is ridiculous. But you get the news reporter that just he mentions it once. He says he says something really cool, doesn't he? He says some people say that it's actually Earth's outward expansion that's provoked the bugs.
That's
and
literally
there's
like
a piece.
The only time where there's a question mark over what they're doing, isn't it? I think it comes like halfway through the film.
And it's from a journalist who expects... He knows the answer is going to be no, because he knows them all. He knows they're going to say... you know, it's almost like a rhetorical question on purpose from that character, isn't it? He knows he's on that ship with all the... I don't know, I just keep saying grunts, but it seems like the right word.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's on... And they're like, you know, a good bug is a dead bug, you know, after... You know, I think there's that bit, and there's also that bit where it's on that news chat show, and there's a lady saying the bugs have brains. So there's a bit more deeper, something different's going on. They can actually think. And then that other guy is very much like you know, someone you'd see on like a Fox News.
Just shutting it down straight away.
This is stupid. I'm never possible.
Yeah, not providing any argument, just refuting yours.
Yeah,
which is kind of quite a common thing of like right-wing media, where they don't present an argument. They just say, well, no, you're wrong, and don't present any kind of argument there. But I think one of the things why I think this film holds up today is because it's a very well put together film. You know, it's a film that everybody working on it knows what they're doing. So, you know, just to go through the crew, obviously we've mentioned Paul Verhoeven, who directed it, and obviously he's worked on things like RoboCop, Total Recall, Basic Instinct, as a trilogy of films in a row to go from RoboCop to Total Recall to Basic Instinct. That's pretty good going. He did kind of falls down slightly in 95 with Showgirls, which is a...
I've never seen it.
Never seen it, but apparently it is one of the worst films ever made. Not my words, but the words of critics.
Is that... I'd be interested to know if it's above or below Battlefield Earth, but I'm going to say it's above.
Yeah, perhaps I was being a little bit too
I've not seen
negative.
Battlefield Earth yet, by the way. So
I have, because I thought it was Starship Troopers. So that was going to be a really interesting rewatch. But could you imagine if Showgirls was considered a good film, and then he goes to Starship Troopers as you know, almost had a perfect run of 5 films there.
I'd like to watch that. I think I love this director, and I think I'd be interested to know what he went wrong with there.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about that movie.
So the script was written by Edward Noumier, who also wrote the script for RoboCop, and actually worked on Blade Runner in the art department, uncredited, but still worked on it. The writer of the novel was Robert A. Heinlein, I think that's how you pronounce it. He also wrote other novels such as Destination Moon in 1950, and he also wrote a short story called All You Zombies, which has been remade into a film called Predestination in 2014, which is a really, really hidden gem sci-fi film.
Really?
It's like, I remember watching it, not really knowing anything about it. It has, what's his name? Oh, I can't think of his name. Guy in Training Day, not Denzel Washington. Why can't I not think of his name? Also in Dead Poets Society. Oh, I literally can't think of his name.
I'm sorry, Ryan, I'm terrible with...
I'm checking out now. I want to say Edward Norton, but it's definitely not Edward Norton. Oh, what's his god? I'm gonna have to Google it quickly. But
Okay.
yeah, he's in there with also the woman who plays Shiv from Succession, and it's a really, really like good little bit of a mind fuck movie. Like you have to watch it, and there's quite a lot of stuff going on with it where if you're not paying attention to it, you could quite easily lose. Ethan Hawke.
Oh, okay,
That's his
yeah.
name.
Fair enough. He's weirdly, it's one. I'm not surprised you forgot it.
But it's an iconic name
Yeah.
nonetheless. Like
Yeah.
that sounds like hi, my name's Ethan Hawke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the Ethan Hunt similarity. for
That's
us, isn't
probably why. Yeah.
it?
So
It's like a cool name.
yeah, Predestination is a really, really good film. I highly recommend that. I've only seen it once, but I remember thinking this is great and wanting to watch it again.
Cool.
So the back to Starship Troopers, produced by John Davison, who worked on Airplane with
cool.
Leslie Nielsen, RoboCop and RoboCop 2, and also The Sixth Day with Arnold Schwarzenegger himself. It was also produced by Alan Marshall, who worked on Midnight Express, Jacob's Ladder, Basic Instinct, Cliffhanger, and Showgirls as well. The composer of the music was Basil Palladores, who worked on The Blue Lagoon, Conan the Barbarian, RoboCop, Hunt for Red October. I feel like if I say The Hunt for Red October, I have to say it with a Sean Connery accent.
Yeah, go on.
So, The Hunt for Red October. So there we go.
Can you do Conan the Barbarian in a Schwarzenegger?
I am Conan. No, I'm not very good at it. Jim is much better at
Jim.
Schwarzenegger. I'll give him a call later and say we need a Schwarzenegger
Over the
impression
phone.
in this one.
Yeah.
The cinematographer, which cinematographers often don't get mentioned, but if you have a bad cinematographer, it really shows, which I think we will see with Battlefield Earth. But a great cinematographer will make a film instantly 10 times better, and that was Jost Vacano, who worked on Das Boot, again RoboCop, Total Recall, and Hollow Man, another Paul Verhoeven film.
I've seen
with
that.
Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, I think I like that. I used to like that when I was young.
I think that's quite an underrated film. I
Yeah.
quite like Kevin Bacon in a lot of things is pretty decent. So
Kind of stick with you, his movies, don't they?
yeah. I mean, it's a kind of modern take on The Invisible Man, isn't it? Mark Goldblatt was the editor. Again, an editor can make or break a film. And also Caroline Ross also helped edit this as well, who'd both worked on Terminator 2. So again, everybody who's worked on this film has worked on some big films. So it's not like these people are new to the craft. They're all experienced, and not that I'm saying if you're new to the craft it's going to be worse, because sometimes that can add a playfulness that comes with not necessarily knowing any better.
Yeah.
But knowing how to make a film and knowing what to do really helps here. I think if, in less capable hands, this would have been much more B-movie-esque.
Yeah.
So,
because I think when I watched it, not last night, but when I watched it a couple of months ago, I was actually really impressed. I forgot how much I like the space parts of this movie. I think like the space battle it's not really a massive space battle, but all the bits with her. What's her name?
Denise Richards is the actress.
Yes,
and she is Carmen Ibanez.
Yeah, so
Ibanez.
She any part with her in the spaceship looks really cool actually, and the bugs shooting their anti-air into space is very like Halo 2. It's very like the Wraith. It's sort of these big. I love the scene where they. To be fair, we should probably talk about when they go to the Clandafu disaster or whatever. When they go land and they're it kind of shows the how overconfident maybe the military is with their forces just to land there, and then they all just get destroyed.
If this was a World War II movie, that would be the Beaches of Normandy type scene, isn't it? Where there's not necessarily an overconfidence, but it is just, it's brutal, it's pure war at its worst.
Yeah.
There's lots of death, there's lots of killing on both sides. Nobody's really winning, nobody's really losing. It's just war, You know what I mean? It's one of those scenes where and it's interesting that that's how the film starts.
Yeah.
You get a glimpse of it, and then it goes into all of these propaganda, want to know more, and all of that kind of stuff, where it's polished and everything. And I think it's interesting that the first, I'd say, sort of 30 to 45 minutes, it's like this elephant in the room. Like, at no point do they really properly talk about what happens when they're actually in the mobile infantry or working for the Federation. Nobody really talks about it. It's just getting to that point, and it's this kind of unseen elephant in the room. And then that scene where they do go to Clan Defu, it's like, this is actually what it is. This is the nuts and bolts of it, and it's not sparkly. Want to know more and all of this. It's grim and it's devastating. Yeah,
it's like the bugs don't really take any prisoners. What do you think of them as a villain? Another difference in the book, I think there's no brain bug in the book, which I'd be interested to know how that works. But because that kind of, the moment they start to discover that, I think it's quite interesting, really, isn't it? Like, they have this sort of it's controlled by these big, they actually. Oh, and there's also they have psychic abilities in this movie as well. I find that really cool. I sometimes forget about that.
That's such a weird plot point for I would say 3/4 of the movie. I kept thinking back to the whole thing because I couldn't quite remember, because I hadn't seen it for a while, and I knew that the whole psychic ability thing crops up, and I couldn't remember how. So throughout 3/4 of the movie, or until it crops up at the end, essentially, I'm going, how does that psychic ability thing crop up? Because it does feel like a very kind of shoehorned kind of thing. It doesn't feel like it fits in this universe. That's probably the only thing I would say where it feels like they didn't have...
Maybe didn't flesh that bit out.
Yeah, that's probably the only thing. I think everything else kind of feeds into...
I think it's like the sacrifice of shoving the sort of... They could have used a lot of those scenes where they sort of have a little sort of romance. The thing is, I love that. I love the bit where he's drawing her at the beginning on that machine. I always remember that. He's drawing her, and then
I think it's a good way of just showing that innocence, isn't it?
Yeah.
That innocence, kind of like they're young people when they don't really know what they're doing.
But they had to have the, it's a big plot point, isn't it? Because with the psychic abilities, because isn't that... They use them towards the end.
Yeah, that's basically how they win.
Yeah, okay,
because Neil Patrick Harris, who is the only one who actually looks like a late teen. He's the only one who looks probably the age he should be playing. I don't think he was. I think he was still in his mid-20s.
Yeah.
But he's the only one, and it kind of works because he's not on the front line battle. He's in the back. He's commanding people, or he's the research and development kind of person, isn't he? So he's not actually on the front line killing. So it, again, feeds into what I was saying earlier about the fact that they look older doesn't actually hinder the film in this instance.
Yeah.
But yeah, it feels like a bit of a weird plot point. But obviously it kind of makes sense as to why it's there at the end.
Yeah, they seem enough into the future where they might have discovered psychic abilities by then. I think by that point you've suspended disbelief a fair bit, so it's not too much of a stretch, is it? Yeah. The music's great in this movie in general, but there is one scene I noticed last night. The where they're having the fight, and it plays that song. I don't know. Christina knew it more than me, but I think it's "Smash Into You" or something.
I can't quite.
It plays like a normal track when there's this sort of fight scene. It's sort of, I don't know. It feels like a different thing, but I suppose it is.
Not that I picked it out, but it is quite weird when you have films that mostly use kind of orchestral scores, and then there's an actual song
in the middle. Sometimes that goes.
It's usually all popular songs, and a little bit of orchestral or no pop. So I kind of get that.
It must have been an artistic choice, and it's
and as I say, I think a lot of the things that were done consciously. I think obviously, as I say, audiences, particularly myself, you can add meaning post it being made, but I think a lot of the choices were quite kind of conscious choices.
I guess at that point it's a bit of a teen drama, isn't it? Because they're like two
feels
guys,
very
it's a
much
love
like,
triangle thing.
It feels very much Dawson's Creek.
That's it. Yeah, that's the
set
vibe.
in a world where there's war.
Yeah,
it's you can almost hear the theme tune over the top. It's not too much of a stretch. And again, it's that whole innocence of these people not really knowing what they're signing up for. Yeah. They're signing up for something because they see it on TV and it looks all grand and it looks...
It's clever, really, because as a young person, I think that's why this movie appealed more to me than the grittiness of RoboCop. Now I'd love RoboCop more probably, but like, as a younger person, this one really sort of that brings me into this world, and then I guess it makes you start to question stuff. I don't know if I questioned. I think I just took this on face value for quite a long time. This Bug movie,
yeah,
because I just for me,
I think the younger you are, the easier it is to kind of do that.
Yeah,
as I say, I first watched it when I was sort of in my late 20s.
Yeah,
so it kind of. But I think obviously we've spoken a little bit about the cast of this film.
Yeah.
So let's just run down. So we have in the starring role, in the lead role, we have Casper Van Dien playing Johnny Rico.
Yeah.
He's also worked in things like Sleepy Hollow. But Casper Van Dien is a strange one because it feels like he should have been able to push on and make a real career after this film. Because he does a really good job. It's not like he's rubbish in this. Yes, I think that, as you said earlier, like some of the lines in the script are a bit corny or a bit... I think that kind of works.
It does work.
It
for the
works
film,
in the
totally.
context of this film.
Yeah.
Like, if it was a serious, 100% straight-laced action film, it would be corny, but it kind of works here because they're teenagers.
Yeah.
When you're 18, 19 and 20, you say some stupid shit.
The best bit is the medic. That's my favourite. When that guy, he take the helmet, he takes his the other guy's helmet off in the boot camp, and then he shouts medic. Because he gets shot and then he goes medic. Yeah,
he's just mirroring the drill instructor, isn't he?
Yeah.
I'm David Heathbrow, Ghost Finder. Now, there are many haunted places up and down the country that if I were to sit here and list them all, by the time I was finished, I'd be a ghost. No, that's just a little joke, although I hasten to add that you should only joke about the forces of evil in the presence of a professional. I once knew a bloke who said that he didn't believe in the supernatural, and the next day he lost his car keys and his dog bit him. Now, you tell me that's not a sign of Beelzebub. But back to business. What I specialise in is determining if there is a presence within your home or office, but office do charge business rates. You and your husband are not trained to know if the fuse blowing on the kettle is a sign of faulty electrics or a message from Satan. I am. I graduated top of my class on the 2-day intensive course at the Lancashire School of the Macabre. For just a snip at £24.97, I will enter your house and check for any unwarranted paranormal. For specialist services, an overnight stay may be required, in which case you must provide adequate catering such as toad in the hole, peas and blancmange to finish. Unfortunately, I'm unable to give a specific price for this, as Dancing with the Devil is not only dangerous, but difficult to quote. That's David Heathbrow, Ghost Finder, as misquoted on BBC BAFTA-winning documentary Debunking Heathbrow. Court case pending. That's David Heathbrow. Find me on CFAX, not the Yellow Pages. So Casper Van Dien, I think is great here, and it's just, as I say, it's strange that he hasn't done a lot more, because he has all the the workings of a good leading man. He's a good looking guy. He was young. He was good actor. As I say, the only other thing I've really properly seen him in is in Sleepy Hollow, where he plays the kind of Prince Charming-esque type character.
He gives me Hot Shots vibes in this movie.
Yeah,
Do you
I know.
Get that from him?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean by that. Yeah, it's that kind of.
Who was that actor again?
Charlie Sheen.
Charlie Sheen, yeah, okay. Yeah,
Which
could
you imagine Charlie Sheen in this role?
I think I could.
Charlie Sheen pre all the drugs.
Oh yeah.
You know, pre having one speed go.
Yeah.
So it also has Dina Meyer playing Dizzy Flores.
Yeah, she's good.
She's the one who looks the oldest out of all of the main cast. She definitely looks like she's in her early 30s.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about it.
I know her most from, she has a couple of episodes in Friends where she plays an aspiring actress who dates Joey.
Okay.
She's also in the first 2 Saw films.
Okay.
I think she's great here. I think there's that. I think what's interesting about all of the characters is they all have those moments where they're totally in the thick of it and they're, you know, how can I put it? So that, you know, they're acting very much like, you know, making big adult decisions, and then they flip and they then resort back into their teenage self. And I think Dina Meyer, does that quite well, along with Casper Van Dien. You've got Denise Richards playing Carmen Ibanez, who I do have to admit, I think Denise Richards is the worst casting decision in the film. She has a very... I can see why she was cast.
Girl next door, isn't it?
Girl next door type of character. But I don't really buy her as the admiral of a big fleet of ships. I don't really buy her as that.
You know what? I've never really questioned it. I've always just...
And therefore, you haven't learnt the lessons of this film. Question what you're seeing. No. Yeah, that's the only thing I don't really buy. I think she's not a particularly great actress. I think she's very good at what she's able to do. So, like, she's in a film called Wild Things with Neve Campbell and Kevin Bacon and Matt Dillon, and that works because she is that. She plays a college student who uses her sexuality to like con some people, and that works. Here, it's a little bit, and she pulls a very strange face every time she's firing a gun or doing something like action based.
I would say she's good at delivering the Dear John letter, you know, and she breaks up with him over FaceTime.
I thought that's the way she does that, because at one minute she's like, "Oh, it's so nice to see you, so happy," but I am breaking up with you.
Yeah, I really like that bit for some reason.
Christ, ease the poor gent into it, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, I have to say I think she's good in this. I am, but
I'm not saying she's. Put it this way, I'm not saying she's good, and I'm not necessarily saying she's bad. I'm just saying that I'm not going to be writing home about her performance.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not going to be saying, "Oh, Casper Van Dien, oh, he's great, he's in Starship Troopers." I'm not going to be saying that about Denise Richards here. Yeah. I'm going to be going, "Oh, it has got Denise Richards in."
Yeah,
it doesn't detract too much away from the film, but I wouldn't say it's.
For me, she's like a face of the movie. You know, like because she's
absolutely,
so
absolutely
recognisable.
Yeah.
And,
it was right in her kind of like heyday, wasn't it? Where she started to become like a big. You know, you think after this she went on to do Wild Things, and then The World Is Not Enough.
Yeah.
You know, so where she played Dr. Christmas Jones in The World Is Not Enough, which is a very, very bad. She's terrible in The World Is Not Enough.
Oh, I haven't seen that
I watched it the other day.
It's not one of my favourites, to be honest.
It's not a bad. I don't mind the film, but Dr. Christmas Jones is quite a lot to take in. We also have Jake Busey playing Ace Levy, who is the other kind of love interest of Denise Richards' character, the other pilot.
He's good.
Haven't really seen him in a lot else, really.
I love the football scene. It's very much like, I don't know if you've ever seen 70s Battlestar Galactica when
I can't say I have.
Well, they play a game with these stupid outfits called Pyramid, and it's like a game where it's like a really rough ball game, but when they did it in Battlestar Galactica, they just didn't have a clue how it worked or anything, so they're just making it up, and it's like, it's really camp and stupid.
Feels very much in this scene, it feels very much like Rollerball and like Death Race 2000.
Well, they've since done it good they tried to do it again in Battlestar Galactica, and it was still a bit cheesy in the noughties reboot or whatever, but I don't know. I like that whole scene. I think he's Because they're, you know, of course they have a bit of a rivalry. Those two, they just it feels.
It's
correct.
part and parcel of like high school and college, isn't it? There's always
they're like the captain of each team or something. It's ridiculous.
You've got Neil Patrick Harris playing Carl Jenkins. Obviously, he needs no introduction. Obviously, from How I Met Your Mother, series of unfortunate events, etc., etc. We have Clancy Brown playing Sergeant Jim. Sergeant Jim, who's the drill instructor.
Yeah, he's great.
Clancy Brown is so underrated. Whenever he's in a film, I'm like, oh, it's got Clancy Brown in.
Do you think
the original Kurgan from Highlander?
Oh wow! I love boot camp scenes in general.
Yeah.
You know, like Band of Brothers. You remember that? I used to just always like the bit when they're in the boot camp with the friends. Dude.
Yeah.
You know, and
it's usually like a training montage, isn't it?
And he's the film's all the better for him being in that.
I mean, not that we're talking about Highlander, but I love that scene in Highlander where you see Kurgan for I think the first time, and he just looks at Sean Connery's character and he just goes, Ramirez. Just absolutely brilliant. He's also in like The Green Mile as well.
Yeah, that's true.
He plays like the slightly horrible prison. Not The Green Mile, The Shawshank Redemption.
Okay.
Two very different films, but both set in prisons.
I've only seen Green Mile once. I've seen Shawshank a million times. It's my mum's favourite movie. But Green Mile, I mean, you can't like double bill those. I feel like.
Well, if you do, you'll be there for like the entirety of the week. Yeah. They're both about, I think Green Mile's just shy of 3 hours.
I've committed my love to Shawshank. Yeah. I don't think I can. I just can't be bothered. I've had enough of that one prison movie. I don't need to.
Yeah, don't watch them on the same day, otherwise it might be a bit too much. We've got Seth Gillum as Sugar Watkins. We have. I just realised I mentioned Jake Busey as Ace Levy, and that's not the other love interest pilot dude at all. It's the dude with blonde hair with massive teeth. Him. He's like the right hand man of. Sorry, I don't know why I got those two.
It's a great cast, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's funny because when you first meet him, you think, oh, he's just a massive douchebag. Like he's like one of those characters. He's going to be the one who's going to be all the time just ribbing and annoying the main character. But actually, as the film goes on, you learn he's got like some morals in him. You know, he's a good right hand man to have. So apologies for any listeners for getting those two confused there. We've got Seth Gillum playing Sugar Watkins, who's been in things like Courage Under Fire and The Wire. He's one of the leaders of the other battalion that they go to like halfway through the film, who's under the teacher.
Yeah.
We've got Patrick Muldoon playing Xander Barkalow, who is the other love interest, who, I think he's great. He's not really in much else, though. I think it's weird.
I do recognise him.
Yeah, I think he's been in a few things. He's been in things like Stigmata in 1999 with Jennifer Arquette. But he was in a B-movie Bruce Willis film like a year ago or a couple of years ago.
Has he ever been a vampire? It feels like he's got vampire energy. Do you know what I mean? He looks a bit like Dave Navarro or something.
He looks like he's trying too hard to be, what's his name from The Lost Boys? Jason Patrick from The Lost Boys. And then finally we have Michael Ironside as Gene Raznak, who is the one-armed teacher who
sort of steals the show, really.
Yeah, and he, you know, as I say, he's been in Scanners, David Cronenberg film. He's been in Top Gun, in Total Recall, and as I mentioned earlier, he's the voice of Sam Fisher in the Splinter Cell films. I think Michael Ironside, whenever he's in a film, a bit like Clancy Brown, I'm like, oh, it's got Michael Ironside in. We're in for an all right film. Yeah. Even if it's a B-movie film, I'll watch it. Because there's certain actors that you just kind of gel with and you go, oh, yeah. Like Clancy Brown, Michael Ironside are definitely those two types of actors here.
There's the dude from Breaking Bad in this as well, Hank.
Dean Norris. Yeah.
I really like him.
There's that scene.
He's actually really good in it.
The scene just before the lashing. The lashing scene. Okay. Did you notice when he's standing up and he's like sentencing Johnny Rico, he has like unusually long arms. It's really weird. It's almost like it's not his arms. anybody who has this film or wants to see what I'm talking about,
Wow.
in the lashing scene, I might have to show you after we finish recording.
We have to watch it.
In the lashing scene, he's like there saying, "Johnny Rico, I commission you to 10 lashings for a da-da-da-da-da-da." But he's literally standing there with his arms down by his side, and his arms literally come down past his knees. It looks ridiculous, and I was like, that's so odd. And then there's nothing else about it at all.
Have you Googled this?
I haven't, but I might have to because it really not. I was like, how is this not, like, how has nobody else picked this out? How have you not seen it for a start? I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, Dean Norris, obviously from Breaking Bad, he's in quite a lot. He's never usually the main character, is he? He's always a supporting character.
Okay, yeah, I have seen this before, but funnily enough, watching it last night, maybe I was too tired. What's going on with that? Is it just because his jacket is just so...
I don't know, because his arms look far too long for his body. I've seen Dean Norris and other things. He's quite a short guy, with but he doesn't have...
In the other scene, he looks normal.
It looks a little bit like the Nightmare on Elm Street scene where Freddy Krueger's running down the street with his really long arms.
Do you think that's the outfit, like, designers just messed up
There's
a bit?
got to be a reason, and I don't know if we'll ever find out, but there's got to be a reason, unfortunately.
That's so funny.
So, obviously, we mentioned earlier about sort of like critics reviews, and obviously just like to go through the older IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes kind of scores. So, if we look at Metascore, so on a I can't even speak now. Critically, has a 52% Metascore. So, I think, as you say, critics didn't necessarily like this film, and I think that's probably, as I was saying before, coming out at a time where we perhaps weren't thinking along the same kind of wavelengths as those excuse me, on those kind of themes that we are kind of looking at now. But if we look at a user score of 8.7, so very highly regarded amongst audience members, 72% tomato meter from critics, 70% audience score, and a 7.3 out of 10 from IMDb. So pinch of salt, obviously, as always with those scores, but it kind of gives us an idea of where people are landing with this. As I say, for years I couldn't understand it because I thought it was Battlefield Earth, but I would certainly agree with those kind of scores. I think there's a lot to love here. There's, it's corny enough to have a bit of fun with it. It's got enough meat on the bone for you to, as we say, have those kind of philosophical, wider questions with it. And it's got great action. It's got great special effects.
Really stand up. The bugs still really stand up. I don't really know how because it's CGI. Yet, and normally stuff from around that time doesn't look as good.
Well, we always talk about the CGI versus practical effects debate. This is a really good example of great CGI.
Yeah.
It wasn't. I was looking for the holes, and I couldn't really find any. Usually you can see it immediately. I was going to say, you said earlier about like the space kind of scenes and the ships and all of those scenes, and I don't know if this is probably says more about Star Wars than anything, but it's very similar to how Star Wars looked.
No, mate, they must use mod.
I think the original trilogy.
Oh, sorry, the guy who had something to do with this had something to do with the original trilogy. And there's actually there's an Easter egg. There's a Millennium Falcon etched into one of the ships.
There you go.
So the space stuff all looks very good, and I think because you automatically think of them shooting the bugs if they're like great, but I mean it looks like it's influenced. It must have influenced the Halo video games
because those guns look exactly like the bog standard rifle.
Yeah, and like
Halo.
just the normal sort of armor and stuff they wear. It's just. The sort of it's just wherever they've set it, like on those planets, looks very believable. The big bug is a bit dubious, but it's grim and it's gruesome. And it's almost like very The Thing.
It
it's
works
a bit
because
gross.
it doesn't look human. It doesn't look like obviously you've got the arachnids things. Like I think what works here in terms of getting the point across is that none of these things look human. Like, it's not like it's an alien where it's got two arms and a legs, but it's slightly weird head, or do you know what I mean? They don't look human at all. So it kind of works with being able to push that idea of you don't see the enemy as human. You kind of dehumanize it to make it easier to kill. You know, it fits very much in with that kind of rhetoric here. But as I say, like, this film's like nearly 30 years old.
Yeah, it's
and
mad.
You know, by this time you probably would be looking and going, oh yeah, that doesn't look very good, or, you know, okay, it had a big budget, so you like to think it was, but technology moves on. But here, as I say, I couldn't really find the holes.
No, I totally agree with you. I think since I've heard there was power armor in it, I would have liked to. I want to see another one where they include it. Do you know what I mean? If they ever, this is a great film to reboot, I think, because you got enough. You know, like
I don't think it should be rebooted.
I don't think anything should be rebooted. Yeah. I guess, but things are constantly. So,
unfortunately, there's very few new things.
This is
coming
one
out.
I would probably go see if they did a relatively good one of it. You know, but I don't know. But you know, like, I haven't even seen the RoboCop reboot. Just to say how much I don't like reboots.
Yeah, I mean, you're not missing much.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
I mean, it's such a shame with that. I know we're not talking about that film, but it's got Gary Oldman in. It's got Joel Kinnaman in. They deserve better, because that was awful.
Really?
That reboot. It's just not. It's not even part of RoboCop. Just misses the point entirely. But shall we move on to those would-be castings?
Okay.
So, some of the names that I'm going to throw out here for the role of Johnny Rico, they're all going to be under the same umbrella, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a sec. So some of the names are people like James Marsden, who is Cyclops in the X-Men films.
Okay, yeah.
Keanu Reeves.
Ooh.
Mark Wahlberg, Marky Mark himself.
Okay.
Josh Brolin. So this is obviously 90s Josh Brolin, so not, a little bit older than he was in the Goonies, obviously. And Jason Priestley. So they were considered for the role of Johnny Rico. Now, I think any of those names, not that they're massive, massive names, but they were bigger names than Casper Van Dien, certainly, at that time. I think you put any of those other people in there, I think part of the problem it has is then people become distinguishable. Excuse me. So what I mean by that is, if you put Mark Wahlberg in this role, for example, or you put Keanu Reeves in this role, you're now watching Keanu Reeves. And I think the fact that we don't really haven't really seen much else of Casper Van Dien, he kind of just he's kind of just another body. And that's kind of the point, is that, well, as it happens with Michael Ironside's character, well, if he dies, somebody else will be there to replace him. And that's what happens with Johnny Rico's character. Within the space of about 20 minutes, he's gone up 4 or 5 ranks because people have died. And it's that thing of going, you put Keanu Reeves in there, you put Mark Wahlberg, James Marsden, any of those names with a slightly higher name value. You
can't really imagine a no-name then replacing Keanu Reeves, on screen. But you can imagine, you can imagine Rico dying at the end of the movie, and then they're just replacing him with another one. Yeah, but I mean, I guess that kind of actually is a good argument maybe for why who's the lady Ibn is maybe an alright casting.
Denise Richards.
Because she's actually quite a famous person and went on to do lots of big stuff.
Well, I don't think she was at that point. I think this was, it wasn't her first role, but it was a role that was slightly more mainstream.
But she's higher up in the echelons of the Admiralty, and so maybe it sort of means that sort of works for the movie.
Well, we have mentioned the role of Carmen. So another name that was thrown out for Carmen was Neve Campbell, who is Sydney in the Scream trilogy or Scream films. So at that point, Neve Campbell was a big name. This is post Scream '96 that came out. Check out our Scream episode in the archives. So if you put Neve Campbell in that role, it kind of does the same thing again. Obviously, we know Denise Richards from past things, but at the time, going to see this, relative unknowns.
Okay, fair.
There's nobody in here that's like a big star. Probably the biggest star at the time you're probably looking at is either Clancy Brown or Michael Ironside, and they're supporting characters in and of themselves. So, as I say, I do think the casting on this is on point for those kind of reasons. So we got Bobby Carnival auditioned for a role in the film. It doesn't say which role, but I would have thought that would have probably have been Patrick Muldoon's character. So the other love interest, the pilot that Denise Richards spends most of her time with.
Okay, yeah.
And considered for the role of Mr. I can never say the name. Michael Ironside's character, Michael Douglas.
I think that would have been good too. Yeah.
Michael Douglas, I think, is Michael Douglas.
Yeah.
I think he's pretty decent in most things. I think I wouldn't have taken him really as the kind of hardened military dude turned teacher.
I think I can definitely see him as that, just because of falling down. Like, he can be, super
Falling
aggressive, and he can also be. He can also be like a loving father, not necessarily. But I can definitely see him being a teacher turned.
So you've just mentioned falling down, and now I'm starting to see it a bit more.
Yeah, because he's quite unhinged, but he can also,
Yeah, I suppose I can't really see him as the.
I think because the film works as it is. Michael Ironside very good at that role, and you wouldn't want to replace him. But
no.
That's a fair. I'd love to see that.
Yeah,
I'm not dying to see it.
And another person who was considered for the role of Johnny Rico, Matt Damon.
Ooh.
So again, you put Matt Damon in that lead Johnny Rico role, and all of a sudden, I think all of the things I've been saying about then don't really happen. So if you put Matt Damon in the film in the late 90s, you probably know that Matt Damon's not going to die. He's the lead. He's not going to die. I kind of never feel like that with Johnny Rico. Johnny Rico always feels like he's in an immediate amount of danger.
Yeah.
Like at any point, his head could get blown off, like the dude in the live ammunition round, trial. Again, that's what I was saying earlier about like cavalierness of like, it's live ammunition. Don't worry, it's just a drill. Why are you using live ammunition in a drill? That kind of renders the whole... he's just died. It's all right, we'll give you 10 lashings. And then I'm going to quit the force now.
There's a bit where they give him back they rip up... I love the scene where he rips up his...
Is this your signature, Rico? Yes, sir. Doesn't look like it to me. That's brilliant.
Yeah, they sort of allude to that character that he was in a similar position to he'd been through it a bit when he was he was the Johnny Rico at one point, doesn't he? Sort of sees himself in him. And
then there's the bit right at the end where they're kind of basically they've got the brain bug and they're just shipping it back to base, and you see Clancy Brown's character Sergeant Zim. He's like now just a private. But he's like loving life. It's like, this is what I was made for. I don't want to be a drill instructor. I just want to be out in the front line. And you do kind of find those, I suppose you do probably in the military, but in this film, it does have those kind of, those characters who you can see long to be on the front line and long to be in the battlefield. Yeah. But because of their age and because of the needs of the service, they're now a drill instructor or a teacher or... and I think one thing I mentioned really early on actually is in the first 20 minutes of the film, apart from the parents of Johnny Rico, all of the adults are war wounded or disillusioned. So Michael Ironside has obviously got one arm and he's basically saying, if you want to become a citizen, why should you become a citizen? And Johnny Rico says what's in the book and he's like, that's what it says in the textbook, but do you know what it means? It's that thing of going, you haven't got a clue what you're about to sign up for. And then when they're signing up and and they go to the, I can never know the guy's name, but he's the dude who plays the doctor in CSI, who's got like a metal hand.
Oh, he's like, I was a private.
He's like, next time I see you, I'll be calling you sir. Yeah, that kind of thing. It's almost like. Another meat for the more meat for the meat grinder. It's that kind of thing of the adults kind of know what's coming, And it's like they're trying to give them hints and they're trying to protect them, but knowing that it's not really going to work because they're just going to, you know, it's like it's like a factory kind of revolving conveyor belt of like there'd be another one and another one and another one and another one if there's not you know what I mean? So
it'd be interesting, like obviously it'll be interesting to know, the film never really says they were, you know, you assume maybe this is the first time they've encountered another aliens species, really, because they have a massive military, but they're pretty much, it looks like they're throwing it all at this. It
almost looks like they've been looking for this.
Yeah, it's just very convenient, isn't it?
Like, we've got this big military and we've been... It doesn't feel like, we've been attacked by this species and therefore we have to set up this military. It's almost like they set up the military and went, right, let's go and conquer the universe. Let's go into the galaxy and take over and colonise places.
And the arachnids, I think, I'd imagine they're almost like a mirror of the humans anyway. Like they shoot their spores at planets and then they colonise the planet. But it's the same as like what the humans are doing in the movie. They're probably sending off, you know, starting civilizations elsewhere and then expanding. Yeah. So that it's like they're fighting themselves and they're controlled by like a would it be a hive mind? I don't know. Just like a one. I know.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because a phrase that I heard a long time ago, but kind of fits quite apparent here, is, and I don't know where it's from. I want to say like it's from Robert Oppenheimer, but I don't think it is. But it's like being the good guy is a matter of perspective, and it's like totally, as you say here, it's like all of the bugs and the arachnids and everything that they're doing, all they're doing is protecting essentially their land. And okay, yes, they attack Buenos Aires from what we've been told by the government, but there's an element of it being like, as you say, I kind of question that because the kind of the devastation that you see with Buenos Aires looks very man-made. Like in a sense of like, it looks like there's explosions and stuff like that. And what we know of the bugs,
it's not
the only thing that is similar to an explosion is the big kind of beetle thing that spews out like lava.
But I guess if they launched an asteroid, like if it was an asteroid,
true.
I don't know.
That's a very good point. But yeah, it kind of is that thing of like questioning. Well, have they actually attacked?
It's good they only show it to you from that clip. I'm pretty sure in the movie they only show you Buenos Aires disaster thing through that propaganda thing.
Want to know more?
Yeah.
You know, after like every advert, it's almost, and I find that phrase is like so like layered because it's like want to know more, and it's almost like you can want to know more and clicking on this more button or following, the more we tell you the less you know. Do you know what I mean? It's asking want to know more, but it's actually saying you don't want to know more, do you? It's, you know what I mean? It's as I say, it's so layered, this film.
It's quite cool actually with the psychic powers and things actually, because they're obviously putting lots of research into the psychic powers, and after a while they would probably use that in, you know, it's already using it in the military, aren't they? So that, like, you know, they could have tried to communicate to the bugs for peace or something, but they could also maybe one day control the bugs like he controls that animal. So it looks like maybe one day they have the arachnids they could potentially have them under the control of their mind powers, because they can do it with animals. And it's like, you'd never do that to a human, would you? But we know they can. So it's like, you know, it's like this. It's like that. It's like the humanity is turning into something that's not that. Doesn't feel as human as we know it anymore. It's becoming a bit.
Where is the line before we become what we're fighting?
Yeah.
You know, as I say, it does allude to that, doesn't it? Towards the end of, like, you know, you see the experiment with the bug and it's like stabbing it with like this like probe thing, and it's just like it's only watchable because the thing we're watching doesn't look like a cute little fuzzy creature, or it doesn't look like a human.
The horrible,
you know.
I guess we'll talk about other movies in a minute, so I'll wait for that section for what I was going to say.
Would you like to know what this film was almost called based on the original script.
Something Outpost something.
So it was originally called Bug Hunt at Outpost 9.
Yeah.
Which I think is a great title.
Yeah,
I actually think that's a better title than Starship Troopers. Because I find the term Starship Troopers doesn't actually... They're not referred to as Starship Troopers in this, are they?
No.
It just feels like a very
I mean, the book is very old, right? So it's a very old sci-fi name for a book. I think it would have been cool if it was called that, because I think it would separate people. I think a lot of the people that are super into the book from my scrolling of Reddit threads, it's not necessarily really behind.
Always a good place to start.
Not behind this movie, because they think they're the same thing, but they're actually very different. And I think he had his own agenda when making this movie because of his upbringing and stuff, and it's almost like a different... He's used a lot of some of the same world building, but it's a very different message it's putting across. And I think if this was called, what is it?
Bug Hunt at Outpost 9.
I think that would have separated it a bit more clearer and been quite a nice thing, really. A Bug Hunt. That's so cool. Bug Hunt at Outpost 9.
Sounds like a mission in in like a Fallout type game.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, mission, new quest started. Bug Hunt at Outpost 9.
So there's quite an interesting story actually on this set of this film. So it's we mentioned it earlier with the shower scene, which feels like a little bit of a nerdy kind of scene of a nerd's kind of, lack of a better term, wet dream type scene.
Yeah.
And it's actually got quite an interesting story into how that was filmed. So basically, Paul Verhoeven and Dina Meyer and Casper Van Dien, they had some discussions around this kind of scene because basically Paul Verhoeven wanted everybody to be naked in the scene because it's a shower scene. And Dina Meyer was a bit like, I'm not really comfortable doing that, and sort of said a little bit off the cuff, well, if I'm going to do it, you can do it as well then, Paul, to the director. And Paul Verhoeven went, oh, okay then. And so to sort of like put them at ease, basically was naked as well whilst it was filming. It's a bit weird the more I think about it, but I think there's some light-heartedness there. I don't think it's as sordid and sinister as it kind of sounds.
Yeah.
But I think that kind of demonstrates kind of Paul Verhoeven's kind of quite light-heartedness on set. So I've seen some of the making of documentaries. Excuse me.
Are you alright?
Yeah, it's got a massive cough. We cut this bit out.
Yeah, I'll have a sip of my drink.
So there's quite a lot of light-heartedness on the set, and during the making of, there's like a scene where I think it might even be the scene towards the end where Denise Richards gets impaled by the one of the arachnids, and then the big bug comes in and sucks the brains out of Patrick Muldoon's character. And basically, because obviously a lot of it is CGI, like Paul Verhoeven was like the bug, and he was saying to like make the people like, or make the actors realise there's a bug, he's basically there going, I'm a bag, like this. And it's just like, it's kind of that zany, kind of like European Dutch kind of humour. And it does seem like quite a fun set to have been on. So I know that story sounded a little bit sordid, and if that happened today, there'd be a lot of questions asked.
I don't know.
I think it's that whole thing of going, okay, well, I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I'm not going to do myself.
I think it just sounds a lot better to make movies maybe back then. Like, it seems something in some respects. It sounded like they just sort of... From that, it just sounded like, that sounds like an okay story. I'm alright with that. She was like, you have to do it too, and then he was like... Yeah, so
that's what they ended up doing. So more ammunition was used in this film than in any other movie prior to this.
Wow.
So according to veteran weapons coordinator Robert Rock Galossi, the crew used over 300,000 blank rounds during the course of filming, which was a personal record at the time. I wouldn't want to be the guy going around picking up the shell casings.
No.
That seems like it is one of those films where there is just like a lot of big battle scenes with a lot of gunfire. I think probably maybe a film like Saving Private Ryan or war films post this may have probably eclipsed that. That's quite an interesting little tidbit there, and obviously lets us know how the film was kind of made. So obviously Paul Verhoeven directed this as well as Total Recall, and some of the walls were actually reused from Total Recall. So some of the set design, and it actually does feel a little bit like some of the set is similar to Total Recall. If you can remember, I'm thinking about some of those scenes.
To me, it feels like this movie is a smash of RoboCop and Total Recall, really, with its own thing. Like the advert. That's a really good
way of putting it, actually.
Yeah, and that's why it's and it's kind of nice to watch a movie like this about Arnold Schwarzenegger in it as well.
Yeah, I don't. As I say, I mean, I know I've mentioned it. It doesn't need any big stars in this. It doesn't need that. It works having relative unknowns, because I think it feeds into those kind of larger questions.
I love the bit where they like have some time off, and like it's the time where he gets with Dizzy, but it's also he opens that trunk of like alcohol, and there's just like instruments in there, and then he who's the blonde dude again? He picks up the violin and starts
Jake
playing
Busey
violin.
Actor, yeah.
I just love that. Yeah, it's a great
that's
bit.
So weird. He's just like, they're dancing, he's just going round and playing this violin.
Yeah, it's like a neon. It's great.
One of the scenes I do like for a little bit of light-hearted humour is when Johnny Rico and Dizzy, they go back to their tent, have a little bit of alone time, and then I never know what rank Michael Ironside's character is, but I'm going to say lieutenant he is, sorry. He comes in and says, 10 minutes, we need to be making our way out to such and such. And then he notices somebody's under the covers, and she pops her head out and says, okay, make it 20 minutes.
20.
It's such a male thing to say, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I think is kind of lost a little bit is the music. Like, I think the music's great, but there was not a point where I was really picking out the music and going, that's really, really good here. The only thing I kind of picked out was that it's almost like a film with two halves, where for the first like hour or so, the music is quite kind of like uplifting and quite hopeful, and then as soon as they go to Clandefu and there's that big battle, that's when the music starts to get a little bit more kind of a little bit more serious, and it's not as hopeful, and it's a little bit more kind of destitute in the way it kind of comes across. I don't know if you pick that out.
I think whenever they're doing something orchestral in a movie like this, I'm always firmly behind it, I think, because it always makes it, I don't know, it has more impact or something. Like I said, the bit, to be honest, I wasn't really, I don't know, I'd have to listen to the soundtrack more properly, but the bit that stood out for me is the sort of Dawson's Creek moment when there's just a normal pop track plays in the middle, which is kind of interesting. So that bit stood out for me as the music decision that I was a bit... But the other music, I'm used to, like... I loved old Battlestar Galactica and things like that, so... I guess
it serves its function, doesn't it?
I didn't go away singing it. Whereas with RoboCop, that one I think it's in my head right now. So if that was the theme tune, I wouldn't have complained because it's a smash. Yeah, but I can't remember what the music from Total Recall is like now. I'm thinking about it.
I haven't watched it in a while.
Maybe it's a similar affair. I'm not sure.
I think some of the things that really do come across in the film, and it kind of is backed up with some of the research that I've done, is it feels very much like a Paul Verhoeven film. Now, obviously it's directed by him, but sometimes you get directors and they don't necessarily have creative control or studio interference, and actually Paul Verhoeven and screenwriter Edward Noumier had quite a lot of unprecedented freedom in making the film, because basically when they were making it, Sony, I think was purchasing Columbia TriStar Pictures or Columbia Pictures. So there was a little bit of kind of like crossover of like management. And when that happens, usually it means things get lost in the kind of shuffle, which is obviously quite good from a creative standpoint. But unfortunately, it meant that the production kind of slipped through the net. And by the time that studio executives saw the footage, it was kind of too late because the film was done. Okay. Whereas, there's, obviously on sets you have like the dailies, and what often happens is they send the dailies to the studio executives and they say, that's not working, we need to recast, or no, I don't like that plot point, we need to get rid of that. Okay. Oh, I feel like we need more romance in this. And so that's sometimes when you get those plot points that don't really feel part of the film. Yeah. But there wasn't really a lot of that in this because of that, that transition in management. And I think it saves the film, because I think it's one of those films where if you'd have had studio executives input in their 2 pennies worth, I think it would have been too much. Yeah. It would have either some of the themes would have been lost totally and not fully explored. And when that happens, it then doesn't really mean as much.
What do you think about? I think that it feels like someone went with their idea and ran with it, and I think I like that about this movie. Like, it just feels very. It feels like whatever he wanted to communicate, he probably can say he got it across. What do you think about like one of the critics' problems with I've read is that they felt like it, glorifies the violence and war that it's sort of saying that it's sort of doing a satirical, commentary on. So, but I mean, because maybe for a real young audience, yes, but I mean, it doesn't make you want to go out and join the military when it's that horrible, does it?
I think it's a very fine line, isn't it?
But the bit, when they're having when at night's time in the tent and he goes 20 minutes and stuff like that, it's like, oh, thanks, Captain, Lieutenant, all those bits, I guess. But, I just think that, I think that it's, yeah, I don't know. That those are some of the reviews I've read about it, and I don't necessarily think that's correct. I think that. What do you think?
Yeah, I disagree. I think it doesn't. I don't think it glorifies anything. I think it shows it, warts and all. Yeah. And I think the part of the point it tries to make is it's more about how people deal with it. So the fact of there are some horrific things we see, like there's the remnants of like that outpost, where there's like, limbs and all of that stuff, which is probably the only, like, one of the only scenes where we actually see like the effects
and like
of
the
mental
bugs. Illness that the guy left there, right?
Yeah,
like, he's obviously
he's obviously just like, he's gone completely batshit.
Yeah,
I think that it has that, but then the whole point of, like, as you say, that scene where they're having lighthearted, like a bit of a party. That's not for us to glorify it. That's for them to be able to deal with what they're doing. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the point, is that, these people are people, and actually it's almost like gallows humour. Like they say, people who work in funeral homes have a really dark humour, because otherwise if you didn't, you'd just go insane because of the stuff you're dealing with day to day. And I think it's the same here. Like, you do hear about, real militaries and armies, they've just been out and they've just defended this particular area here, and then they go out and they have like a little bit of a party with a boombox, in the evening to let off steam. And you kind of have to have that, otherwise, there are still obviously instances where people come back with like, what used to be called shell shock or post-traumatic, stress disorder, and all of those kinds of things. And I think that's kind of I don't think it glorifies it, but I can see why people would say it does, because it's such a fine line. Like, there is an element of going, it's a cool movie, this, but I think people misinterpret that and go, I don't think it's a cool movie because people are wanting to sign up. I think it's a cool movie because it questions why we're doing the things that we're doing, and it, and actually, at no point does it actually ask you those questions directly, other than that one journalist, and he's swiftly killed off. And I think that's quite a good metaphor for maybe the reason why he's reporting out on Clandefu is because he's asked too many questions.
Oh, maybe.
Because he's done that before, so they go, well, let's put him on Clandefu.
Well,
then.
also, the journalists often get shot and killed in war. It's quite a normal thing, isn't it? Right? That's the risk they always take to and it's very like, Vietnam, that, isn't it? Like the sort of him sort of reporting live from thingy. I don't know, like capturing on the boots on the ground.
Yeah. So it is a difficult. So I genuinely don't think it glorifies it.
Yeah.
But on the subject of those critical reactions. So Roger Ebert, who's probably the most well-known like movie critic of the last.
Oh, sorry, Ryan, you got 30. Some of the reviews.
Well, this is
well
a couple
done.
of things taken from the LA Times.
Okay, cool.
Roger Ebert said, and not that one person's opinion means that this film is good, bad, or anything in between.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, Roger Ebert is quite a good barometer of how good a film is.
Yeah.
But he said that this film cheerfully lobotomized. He called the film cheerfully lobotomized and labelled it as one-dimensional and totalitarian.
Wow.
And I think, again, it sounds like such a dick thing to say. I think that's the point he's missed. It is totalitarian, it is far-right, it is fascist. Yeah. And I think, as I say, it comes from Paul Verhoeven's wanting to show you exactly what happens in a far-right fascist society. All of these things are taken. The only people who seem to enjoy what happens in the film are the people who don't know any better, really.
Yeah.
Johnny Rico is the only one who questions it, and the only reason he questions it is because he's been dumped. He got into this because of a girl, and he gets dumped, and that's when he questions it.
He's also got bad grades. We know he's not the smartest guy in the book, really, but he's very practical.
Yeah, which also a brutal way of seeing your grades.
Oh, yeah.
Christ! Imagine that when we're doing our GCSEs. What did you get? Oh, let me put it up on the big screen.
But isn't that an American thing? I swear it happens in Buffy or something when they they go to a wall when they're looking at stuff.
I don't know if that's
Isn't that how they see what classes they're in?
I'd like to think really that's midterms or actually that is exactly what happened when I got my degree.
What?
On a wall we went up and saw what we got, so actually it does happen.
Yeah.
But it just seems it happens on a bit of paper on a notice board.
Yeah, but now at school
not on a big screen for everybody to see for miles away.
Well, it's his mate, isn't it? It's the clever one gets it bigger on the screen in large. Yeah. But that's really unfair. I mean, is he is he always dumping on movies like this?
Not necessarily. I think as I say, he's quite a good barometer, Roger Ebert, of whether or not a film is good. Obviously, it's one person's opinion, so it doesn't really mean much. If you like a film, you like a film. I think that's just kind of what I was saying about you either get it or you don't get it.
Yeah,
he's kind of hit the nail on the head that it's totalitarian, and it is kind of one-dimensional in the sense of it has the message is one thing.
Hold on, is that a positive review or a negative review?
I think he meant it in a negative way. Yeah, absolutely. Okay,
I thought he was saying,
that's kind of what I'm saying. Is in his critique of it and in his negative review of it, he's kind of proved the point of the film because it is one-dimensional. Because the message we get from that film is join up, do your country or your planet good, protect your fellow humans, etc., etc. That's the kind of message it's telling us. It's as I say, the audience filling all the gaps. So we're filling all in the gaps, whereas it's an overwhelmingly positive positive viewpoint on what's happening, and again,
as much as it can be.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the point. You go back to Nazi Germany, and I think a lot of the rhetoric that was coming out of that society was that we're doing good. This is good for the country. This is good for what we need. You're doing a service, much like it was over here for the Allied, armies and things like that, we were saying the very same thing. And it, not obviously condoning any actions whatsoever, but I think this film kind of goes back to that point of, being the good guy is a matter of perspective. Here I think it's, the bugs here, I think you could apply so many different kind of metaphors to this. Like, it's quite a good metaphor for racism. It's quite a good metaphor for, society, in the way that when we see something different from ourselves, or people take advantage of those differences and pit people against each other. Now, I'm not saying that we should live happily ever after with a load of arachnids that look like they could kill you in an instant. But it's the whole thing. It's a lot easier to make that jump because they're so different from us. Whereas if they looked exactly like us, it would be a much more difficult thing. And I think that's another idea that it kind of plays around with.
No, for sure. So,
I think that brings us on quite nicely to some other general trivia. So this film was actually not, we mentioned the special effects. It was actually nominated for an Oscar for Best Visual Effects.
Do we know who won it?
Well, it was nominated along with The Lost World, Jurassic Park.
Oh, okay. So that won it.
And it was nominated alongside Titanic.
Oh, hold on. So that won it.
And it lost to the Titanic.
Okay, yeah, fair.
Which, I've seen some videos of the special effects in the Titanic, because I've never seen the Titanic.
What?
I've never seen it. I know what happens. I don't need to watch it.
Ryan, that's not how you look at movies.
It is how I look at the Titanic. It's really, really long.
Yeah.
I know exactly what's going to end up. I haven't seen it in its entirety.
You're not a James Cameron guy.
I'm a James Cameron guy, but I'm not a James Cameron post-95 guy.
Okay. I would say that Titanic is good.
Well,
I even... weirdly, I was procrastinating the other day and I stuck it on. That's how much I wanted to procrastinate what I was doing. I put it on for like 10 minutes. I can't watch
literally never been... As I say, I've seen bits of it and I know the general gist. I've never had the desire to watch it in its entirety or in its full. But I've seen clips of like the sweeping shot of the Titanic, and some of the special effects in that look awful. There's literally like a point where it looks like The Sims. Yeah. And that's what we're saying about like CGI and being dated. So
I would say that the good parts of Titanic is how they made the ship look and stuff, like on the practical stuff. So, but is this like, what was that Oscar for?
That was for the visual effects. So yeah, visual effects is kind of the practical stuff as well, isn't it?
So maybe that's
so I'm being a bit harsh there.
But if it was no, to me, I say Starship Troopers. But I mean, Titanic probably won loads of stuff that year. Is that I think it
won like 7 or 8 Oscars. So it's, again, I think I dislike it because it's so clearly like an Oscar bait type film. Like nobody's gonna, like, for example, if I start bashing the film The Titanic, the first thing that people are going to say, well, it's a piece of history that really happened, da 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 da.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, yeah, that's great, but yeah, generally speaking, I don't really like things that are based on true stories if I know what happens.
Yeah.
Because I know where it's going. I like not knowing what's going to happen, and I know what's going to happen in the Titanic. At some point, they're going to hit a big iceberg and they're going to sink.
But then you only know that for the first time you watch it, like, because when you rewatch movies, you always know what happens. But we always rewatch movies.
Yeah, but it's a bit, I
think it's okay to say that. I think it's okay to say that it's just a romance.
Oh, yeah, I don't really do romance.
There you go.
Yeah, I think that's probably more.
And you also don't do dragons.
I don't think there's any dragons in Titanic.
No, but you also... Are
you trying to tell me that that's what sunk the Titanic?
No, but you don't like fantasy as well, is that correct?
Yeah, like Lord of the Rings has never been a thing for me. I know that's... some people are going to be like getting their pitchforks out at the moment. But yeah, it's all what it comes down to. But yeah, Titanic has never been a thing for me. So yeah, it lost to the Titanic. One of the films that it competed with most at the box office, and it's strange to think this, is the 1997 film Bean, based on Mr. Bean.
I love that movie. I actually think that's good. Do you like that?
I think it's... Mr. Bean. I think it's difficult with that because I think the Mr. Bean character is best in short doses.
Of course, yeah.
In an hour and a half, by the end of it, it's a bit... You're getting a little bit like, oh, here we go again. But having said that, Rowan Atkinson has been is
I like that
is
guy
a great comedy
who plays
performance.
the guy from Ally McBeal. That's
yeah,
the guy.
I know.
He's great.
He's from Ghostbusters 2 as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So that's what it was mainly competing with, which seems strange. And it says here, due to the R rating of the film and its underperformance. Let's read that again. Due to the R rating of the film and its underperformance and Bean exceeding expectations, there were claims that under-17s may have bought tickets for Bean and snuck in to see Starship Troopers.
Whoa.
Which sounds 100% bullshit, but 100% I believe.
Yeah, I like that.
Like that sounds like a conspiracy theory that I can 100% get on board with. So we need to look at Bean's box office figures and go, that's actually Starship Troopers, that, which I think it's that sounds like such a cool thing. Like, I watched Starship Troopers in the cinema because I bought tickets to see Bean and just went in there. Because it's easier to do that now. I remember when we were growing up and going to cinemas, you used to literally have people on the door checking your ticket. Like in a big one like Cineworld, like when it's like a smaller screen, they kind of still have that. But now, like I went to see Late Night with the Devil, and he checks your ticket at like one area here, and then you go on like a massive walk to your screen, and I'm like, I could literally go into any film here. Like I could literally, obviously I know I'm of age where I can see any film I want, but if I was like a teenager, I could literally go into any film here. So very, very believable.
Or more just stack the movies. You could watch 2.
Yeah, because nobody's checking these things.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it is the way of the cinema,
Be
unfortunately.
interested to know if they were checking it.
Yeah. In those days, I feel like they would have been checking it a bit more. So it makes it even cooler that they snuck in to see Starship Troopers. So I think in closing...
Okay.
With Starship Troopers, I think you kind of get out of it what you want to get out of it. So we've obviously spoke a lot about some of like the wider themes and the philosophical kind of things, but you don't need to have that. If you just want to watch a mindless popcorn brain candy film, it's exactly that as well. I think that, before we started recording, we spoke about Christina saying, I've watched it a couple of times and I fell asleep. My wife Hannah didn't even attempt to watch this film because in her own words,
it's her Titanic.
Nope, not for me. So, and I kind of get that because for her, it's exactly what it looks like on the tin. Yeah. It looks like a macho shoot 'em up, and it, for the most part, it is that. And it's only when I was like saying about, it's got like wider themes, it's actually really interesting. She's like, oh, really? That's when she become more interested in it. So I think it, as I say, it kind of brings whatever you want to the table with this film. Not whatever you want. Like if you want like a hard mystery whodunit, it's not the film for you. If you want, really deep intellectual romance, again, not necessarily for you. But for this kind of like 90s sci-fi film, it's got all its bells and whistles.
Yeah, for me, I think I love sci-fi as a genre in general, and I think this is a good. I love this one, and I think there's just always room for these ones of like it makes you question the future, it makes you think of what ifs, and there's just a lot to talk about with it, and I think sometimes some things that may have been creatively, even things they might have gone a bit wrong with in this movie, like we're making, I feel like all adds to why it's really cool and like the sort of, I love this movie, and I would say, I love chatting to people who also love this movie, and if someone else likes this movie, I know that I have a lot in common with them, like immediately. Because they probably like RoboCop, they probably like Total Recall, they probably like Conan, Yeah, they probably.
It's a good conversation starter, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think this is a bit of a golden age of movies for me, just in general. And I don't know, just the fact that you could really get behind these characters, but then you think, oh, are these guys even the good guys really at the end? And the whole, the supporting cast really support the whole movie, don't they? Like, there's not. I know you were saying Ibanez is a bit of a weak performance, but potentially
it's the weakest performance, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a weak link.
No, and it all sort of, I don't know, it all sort of works. The practical. I think if this movie had some dodgy practical effects, because it all lines up nicely, like everything's like an 85%, 90% smash. Everything's pretty good. That because it doesn't really fall down on any specific point, I don't think. And where it does fall down, like, oh, the script's a bit shoddy, you'd be like, yeah, but that's on purpose. Yeah, I mean, you can be like, that's probably a creative decision, because it's just like, in the books it was all the cast were it's a diverse cast. It's like, oh, well, maybe that's on purpose because it's a propaganda. Everything can sort of, it's a really good watch just generally, and to me you get those Star Wars space effects in. And the movie generally always looks a bit more timeless, and
not to say that bad special effects or bad CGI or bad practical effects ruins a film.
It might have ruined this one though, because there's a lot of bug stuff.
I think it would have ruined this one. The Terminator, for example, you go back and watch that now, and the Terminator head, when we spoke about it in the Terminator episode, go back and listen if you haven't. That looks quite dodgy now. It looks a bit ropey, but it doesn't ruin the film. Here, I think if you get the bugs wrong, if you get the brain bug wrong, if you get the space elements wrong, even if you get the sets wrong, it can all fall apart. And I think everything kind of does just fit together quite nicely. And I know there's an element of like how much as us as us too as an audience applying the meaning to the stuff. It may sound to some listeners like we're justifying the things that we like rather than it being actually there. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of avenue for that. It doesn't, there's a lot of questions to be asked around those things. So it kind of fits. It doesn't feel like we're just saying it for the sake of it. Yeah,
and it's just all this stuff, crazy, absurd stuff is happening to the main characters, and it's that it's a bit of a love triangle story at most points, so it doesn't really hold your hand really for a lot of the world building, does it? And then you can thrown straight into it, and you're just there to absorb it, and you can come back any time and you'll be like, oh, there's a Millennium Falcon on that ship, or you can come back and be like, wow, his arms are a bit too long, or you can come back and there's probably a lot of other things. The sets. I always remember like how much I really wouldn't have wanted to play that. Not the one before the live action shooting training. The actual just training thing when they're shooting like electric. They're shooting. That's horrible. I don't want to play that game. Yeah, it's like the worst level in a game, isn't it? Yeah. But yeah, so I love this one, Ryan. Well, good. So further watching. So I'll run down my list. I think one that you hit upon earlier was obviously Edge of Tomorrow, or otherwise known as Live, Die, Repeat with Tom Cruise. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of editing of coughs in this. Awful lot, that's an awfully... I don't even know what I'm saying. Let's start that bit again. So we mentioned earlier Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise. That's a great film. I think that fits in quite nicely. A very similar kind of themes, actually. Even the, alien kind of species kind of attacking us, or we're attacking them. Who's the good guys, who the bad guys, that sort of thing. A bit of a left field choice here, and I don't know if you remember it or you see it, but it used to be a program, and I feel like it was on Channel 5 in the 90s, about a police force in space called Space Precinct. Yes.
I think if you go back and watch that, I think there's a lot to love that's very similar.
Really?
To this here.
I had the toy. You know what? We had a moment at a boot sale where we had like the original toys of Space Precinct.
I remember I used to have a car, because in the thing they have flying cars.
Yeah.
So there was like a police car, and it had like a gun handle underneath.
Yeah.
So you could like hold it and pretend it was like flying around. But yeah, I think if you go back and watch Space Precinct, I think there's a lot of stuff that you wouldn't necessarily have picked up if you were watching it when it came out, but obviously set in space and like the human kind of bureaucracy of stuff. I think there's a lot of kind of stuff there, and I think it's just a little bit of 90s nostalgia. I think obviously we've mentioned films like RoboCop, Total Recall, Basic Instinct, other Paul Verhoeven films, Sleepy Hollow, if you like a bit of Casper Van Dien. And I think also for those kind of philosophical questions, I think The Matrix is...
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It's not... I mean, it's not the same, but it has those kind of, questions around, human nature and that kind of element. So I think, there's a lot of kind of crossover likes there if you like that.
Yeah. For me, there's a lot of films that sort of... there's a few films that have done this type of thing, but in a slightly bleaker way, like District 9. Have you seen that?
Absolutely. That was another one that I meant to put down.
Yeah, so that is so bleak.
Yeah,
but for me, those ones. There's another one you mentioned as well. Sorry, Ryan, but maybe you didn't. But for me, that's a hard one. I would not. I think we had the DVD of District 9, and for me, that's just too bleak. Like, I would watch Starship Troopers and get the sort of social commentary and the fun stuff I like, but it's not as dark. Oh no, to be fair, RoboCop even is. So I can't always be bothered to watch that. I don't really want to see him get shot to pieces at the beginning. I don't know why that scene always
so brutal.
Yeah, so it's like, and that world is even. This world is bleak, but it's done in a very, like, their cavalier attitudes and their spunky personalities.
It's bleak, but it's been painted over with a nice colour paint.
Yeah, and it does just make this one more pleasant to watch, and it makes this one more fun to watch with friends, and it makes it more like a sort of popcorn movie. And I have to say, I just prefer those kind of movies. I just find them much... I love fun, campy, Flash Gordon-y type of space romp things, and this one kind of gets it really well. But yeah, the ones if you want the more sort of darker worlds, like the District 9's probably a good one. There's like the movies like get you thinking, like They Live and stuff, but they feel a bit dated now. The one
check out the upcoming, the previously released episode of Pro Wrestlers in Movies, The Good. Ooh. Where I cover They Live,
the fight. The fight in the back alley.
Go back and listen to that episode.
Check that out.
Yeah.
But as this is a sci-fi movie, we should be looking forwards. So I think that for me, the sci-fi movie the book I've mentioned that really got me into the sci-fi world is Forever War, and it's very similar to this, but it's more of an anti-war book than the original book, than Starship Troopers, the novel. So movies I can't wait to see is them adapting the Forever War. So I'm not going to do a further, you should read this. So wait till the movie comes out. Do you know what I mean? Because this is a movie podcast. But so look to the future. I can't wait till they make that. To be fair, the Tom Cruise one, The Edge of Tomorrow, I love that movie. But even that world's a bit too bleak for me. It's when he's sitting in a pub at one point. It's all empty.
I think perhaps what I was saying earlier, if you'd have made this film post 9/11, it probably would have been a bit bleaker.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have had that, that, because everything's kind of like, it's almost like, the only way I can say about it is it's almost like being punched in the face, but the person's smiling at you when they do it. Do you know what I mean? It's that thing of going, this thing is absolutely horrible, but don't worry, sign up today.
Medic!
Yeah. It's such a cavalier kind of... I think all of the ones that you've mentioned are good shouts. Flash Gordon, I think, is a good shout there. Obviously slightly different, but I think, again, it has... if you like this, you'll probably like that.
Are we allowed to say Battlestar Galactica the series?
You can say whatever you want on this podcast, as long as it's not offensive.
The Battlestar Galactica the series.
Yeah.
But I think, to be honest,
Babylon 5, those kinds of things.
I think we should have maybe ended with I should have said Star Wars. Oh, well, we should have ended really on the
Star Wars is a bit of an obvious one. I think to be honest, if in 2024 we are having to recommend Star Wars to people, I think they've been sleeping under a rock for quite a while.
There's never a bad day to look, especially with all the new nonsense ones coming out. Some people are like, yeah, I've seen some of the Star Wars movies. And they haven't seen the actual good ones.
The actual ones that started it all off.
So if you like the way the spaceships look, then... you're right, that is dumb. Yeah, we should have ended it when you said punch in the face, but the other guy's smiling.
Well, do you know what I mean, though, with that? It's that whole thing of, it's something horrible is happening, but it's being presented to you in this very happy or very, nice way. And I think that kind of sums up Starship Troopers quite brilliantly.
Yeah.
Good evening and welcome to Inside the Actor's Mind, the show that delves deep into the psyche to find out what makes a great character, a great performance, and what makes a great actor. I am Julius Oxbridge Teeth III. Join me as we go deep into the actor's mind. I'm Julius Oxbridge Teeth III. Won't you join me next week as we go deep into the actor's mind?
Unfortunately, it's come to that time in the episode where we have to say goodbye. We hope you've enjoyed listening as much as we've enjoyed making it for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts from, and if you're feeling extra generous, why not tell a few friends? Also, head over to our social media platforms where you can stay up to date. So for today's episode, you've been listening to Ryan Etherington, Simon Keet and Jimmy Murphy. Together, we have been Bury Our Bones for Cinema. And it will be a one-button job. Boom, 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 toom, toom, toom.
I have a terrible tendency to just swear about if you're talking, when we're doing it, I still find it slightly distracting.
It's a bit weird, but I think it's a bit weird, but I suppose...
maybe if you listen to it back, see if it sounds... I was like, I'm going to have to stop it. You listen to it back,
Good job I observed that well, wasn't it?